So today we want to talk about the last 2 days in the bank earnings and how we have come out with our tremendous banks. The last 2 days we've had our big banks, our G-SIBs, come out with their earnings, and every one of them was all-time high, stocks at an all-time high. These guys have done just a great job, right? This is what it's all about. We have the best banking system, and thereby our banks outperform everybody else. But what really happened behind the scenes? Now, last year we did a bunch of videos on the SLR, the supplemental leverage ratio, which G-SIBs have to pay because of the great financial crisis. So you can see the supplemental ratio for globally systemically important banks, okay? And they said, look, we found out during the great financial crisis, they need to maintain a sufficient capital buffer against total leverage exposures, not just risk-weighted assets. This is a very important point. So as you know, we've done multiple videos on risk-weighted assets. So the government says if you buy a listed derivative, your reserve is X. If you buy an over-the-counter derivative, it's Y. So every single investment vehicle has a capital requirement by the government, and the people try to keep the high risk-weighted assets out and just invest in the low. So for US G-SIBs, the minimum SLR requirement is typically 5% above the 3%. So think about it, you got $1 trillion balance sheet, okay? And so 3% is in cash at the bank, 3%, all right? And we said for the G-SIBs, it has to be 5. And it's not based on their RWA. So the RWAs, as we just said, you could have different levels of capital requirements. The SLR is it overall. It just says if you're at 3%, you go to 5%. There's nothing you can do about your risk-weighted assets. It's just for leverage, okay? And we know we have G-SIBs after the great financial crisis because one of these banks could trigger a global financial instability, and the SLR helps ensure banks maintain ongoing concerns. Okay? And they say right here, unlike risk-weighted assets, the SLR doesn't allow banks to reduce capital requirements by holding assets deemed low risk. And so all this is about is reducing the likelihood and impact of a G-SIB failure on the financial system. But last year, our G-SIBs wrote a letter, all of them together, to the Treasury Department, to the Fed, and to our FDIC, and they said, listen, even though the system's set up, when you auction off new treasuries, we get them all. The G-SIBs get them all. They distribute them out to the system. We've talked about this, okay? So what they told us last year is, no way we're going to participate ever again in an auction if we have to hold reserves against the treasuries. We're out. And they started this last February, okay, when they sent the letter. And we did a video, it has the letter in there, you can read it yourself. I know what I would have told them, but what happened was the three regulators thought about it, took comments, and then they said, you know what, we agree with you, and the SLR will go away eventually, all right? So last May 14th, you can see it here, the three regulators agreed, we knew this, right? And they're poised to dial back the bank reserve rules. So they say, first paragraph, biggest cut in capital requirements more than a decade. It's the only cut, all right? And you can see here, the Federal Reserve, Office of Comptroller, and the FDIC all propose to reduce the reserve requirements for the SLR, okay? And the banks have, and what they tell you here is the banks have to have a preset amount of high quality capital against their total leverage. This is what I'm telling you about. No risk-weighted asset, total leverage. So what does this mean? All right, so the lobbyists say the current rules punish lenders for holding even low-risk assets such as U.S. Treasuries and hinders their ability to facilitate trading in the $29 trillion U.S. government market. And the critics say, yeah, well, we're letting them in, now there is no supplemental. So now, on October 12th, the bank deregulation set to unlock. So think about what we're doing here. Set to unlock $2.6 trillion. All right. So remember that number, 2.0 trillion, and set to unlock. All right. So they say the unprecedented easing of capital rules, which new research shows could unlock 2.6 trillion in lending. All right, let's be honest here. Our banks, these G-SIBs, they don't lend. They have lending, but they're out of the mortgages. They don't do car lending. They don't do any of that stuff. This is about their trading balance sheet. They can buy another $2.6 trillion worth of securities to try to make money on, and it's likely to free up to 140 billion in capital for them to do this 2.6 trillion dollars. Okay, think about something. We're giving them 140 billion. They're going to invest 2.6 trillion. 140 into 2.6 comes out to 19.3% times, not percent, 19.3 times leverage. So our banks are leveraged basically 20 times. Okay, and here you can see the 140 billion. And here you can see Switzerland. We've done many on this, UBS. They're actually saying, no, you have to have another 2% on top of the 5%. And UBS is crying, but as you can see, they're going to go through with it. And they forecast that this will be a 35% boost in their earnings per share and a 6% increase on their return on average tangible common equity, a benchmark used by investors. Okay, so remember that 35% boost. And here's the three top banks who get the biggest bang from the SLR going away. Okay, so look at Morgan Stanley's chart for the past year. Look at there in April and May at the low when we finally decided that we were going to allow them not to have the SLR. Look what happened to the stock price. Now, what it was is in April and May is the three regulators said, we're not against this. We'll take in comments and we'll make our decision later. And the decision was made in late June, early July. Here's Goldman Sachs, April, May, late June, July. JP Morgan, April, May, late June, July. Okay. So what's this telling us? All right. So you saw that they said that this freeing up the 35%, okay, excuse me, this SLR would increase their earnings by 35%. So anybody that you see that announced in the last 2 days not up at least 35%, guess what? Yes, they're having record quarters, but they're underperforming how much capital we gave them back. And again, you got to think about something. Our banks are 20 times leveraged. So if you have $1 trillion, you got 3%. That's it, 3%. So if the market goes down 10, they blew their whole 3%. This is what it's all about. So you must realize something. Once they knew in April and May that the regulators were going to agree to their terms after they sent the letter, they immediately started taking the capital and employing it into their balance sheet. All right. So by the time we get to here, they've already taken that 140 billion. It's already invested, and look at where their earnings are. But here's the rub, right? We put this on after the great financial crisis. Every one of our banks was bankrupt. Now I know they'll say we were forced to take the 10 billion and all this other stuff. Totally false. Okay. They were already bankrupt in August of 2007 when the reserve fund went belly up and all their funding disappeared overnight. We bailed out every single bank, and we put on the SLR for a reason. And then this administration has taken it away. And now look at what these banks. So yes, are the bank earnings good? Absolutely. We just gave them $140 billion to throw into the market. And by the way, go back and overset the Dow over when the banks got the money. Guess what? We were there. We were powering this market with our banks. So, should we get rid of the SLR? Tell me in the comments and like and follow. Thank you very much.